The media directs your attention to kinetic events. A massive attack on Ukraine's cities. Lockheed Martin recertifying Taiwan's Patriot PAC-3 missiles. This is the loud, expensive, and visible dimension of conflict. It is also a strategic diversion. The prevailing doctrine among Western adversaries is not to match this kinetic cost, but to bypass it entirely. The primary vector for asymmetric escalation is not a hypersonic weapon. It is silence. The weapon is the systemic paralysis achieved by blinding the central nervous system of global finance and logistics. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS have modeled this extensively. The most effective decapitation strike is not aimed at a capital, but at the infrastructure that enables command, control, and commerce. This is the blueprint for creating the blind Leviathan. A superpower armed with unparalleled military hardware, but rendered deaf, dumb, and blind. Cut the 1.3 million kilometers of undersea cables that carry over 10 trillion in financial transactions daily. Blind, or jam the satellite constellations that provide GPS and secure communications. The result is not a battlefield loss. It is a systemic solvency crisis. The Leviathan cannot command its fleets, it cannot clear a single transaction, and its currency enters freefall. The state apparatus remains, but it is paralyzed, locked in a state of launch-on warning with a financial system that has ceased to exist. When the dollar is already battered and gold is recording its best performance since 2008, this silent vector isn't a hypothetical risk. It is the calculated logical endpoint of asymmetric escalation. The central motive is not conquest. It is solvency. When a state actor's balance sheet begins to bleed from kinetic costs, the war ceases to be a geopolitical project. It becomes a domestic liability. CSIS analysis confirms this calculus regarding the Russian Federation. The protracted conflict in Ukraine, characterized by massive attacks on major cities, has generated unsustainable economic and political strain. An unpopular war is a systemic vulnerability. It represents a ticking clock against the regime's own stability. Weakness forces the pivot. When a state cannot afford to win the kinetic war, it is forced to change the battlefield. The doctrine mandates a shift from a symmetric contest of attrition to an asymmetric attack on the adversary's critical vulnerability. The core calculation driving modern warfare is no longer strategic positioning. It is a brutal cost-benefit analysis. According to analysts at the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, the dominant kinetic exchange is now mathematically asymmetric. A modern main battle tank is a $5 million asset on a state's balance sheet. The instrument of its liquidation, a commercially modified FPV drone, costs $500. This is not a balanced exchange. It is a 10,000 to 1 leverage ratio against conventional military power, converting every deployed heavy asset into a high-risk, negative-yield liability. This protocol is known as the democratization of violence. It signifies the systemic collapse of the state's monopoly on projecting lethal standoff force. The capability to neutralize multi-million-dollar military hardware is no longer firewalled by billion-dollar defense budgets. It is now distributed, accessible to any actor with access to consumer electronics. This economic reality renders protracted ground wars, as documented in Ukraine, a systemic drain on national solvency. The battlefield becomes a financial trap, accelerating the pivot to the only remaining vector for a cornered adversary, a direct solvency and liquidity attack on the system's financial architecture. The doctrine is irrefutable. When a state actor faces conventional failure, as evidenced by stalemates and the immense kinetic cost of missile deliveries, the protocol is not surrender. It is escalation, but along a different vector. The Lockheed Martin contract for Taiwan's Patriot missiles represents a quantifiable increase in the economic and military liability for any aggressor. The reports of resumed peace talks after massive attacks in Ukraine demonstrate the zero-sum nature of the conventional battlefield. These are not signs of resolution, they are triggers. These battlefield liabilities are systematically converted into financial risk. An adversary, unable to defeat a Patriot missile battery, instead leverages a gray zone proxy to attack the liquidity of the system that pays for it. CSIS reports confirm this methodology. The objective is to engineer a solvency crisis. We are observing the direct consequence of this strategy in real time. Reports of gold recording its best week since 2008 as the dollar is battered are not a coincidence. This is a weapons test. It is a targeted probe against the system's financial integrity, demonstrating a clear cause and effect relationship between kinetic pressure and monetary devaluation. The blueprint is now active. Every proxy war stalemate, from the SDF's warnings in Syria to the trench warfare in Ukraine, is an accelerant. It creates the mathematical certainty that a cornered adversary will escalate its financial warfare from probes to a systemic assault. The ultimate goal is not to occupy territory, but to trigger a launch-on-warning protocol within the financial system, a cascading liquidity failure. The kinetic nuclear arsenal serves only as the final backstop for a state actor executing a full-spectrum attack on the dollar's solvency. This isn't chaos. It is a calculated multi-domain siege.